this is realistically an emergency. If something really bad happened in America and a lot of people can't drive because their stupid trucks are shutting down or they're plugged up
Well, they
in the
can't
exhaust.
ship anything. You can't get food. You
Yeah.
can't farm. I mean, it's a
Yeah.
bad deal, and it's a
It's
national
a
security crisis. I'm Carson Jorgensen. And this is the Carson Jorgensen Podcast. Well, thanks for joining me, buddy. We've been talking about doing this for a long time. We've been doing a lot of things together, and we're glad we could finally get together. But before we jump into it, why don't you take a minute and introduce yourself, kind of tell everybody a little bit about you, how you got into the diesel space, and where it all began.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, Carson. We've been at it for a little while now, nonstop.
Yes, we have.
No, I got into this industry realistically. I mean, I've always loved diesels, like since I was super little. And at like 13 years old, I was helping my friends put like programmers in their trucks. We were tapping manifolds and actually really sucked. So like the it would break off in there and then send it through a turbo. You know, being a dumb kid.
Yeah.
All the stupid things. So we learned from all those mistakes. And by the time I'm like 17 or so, I'm actually really playing with them. I bought a custom tuning software called EPA Live. And like, this was before like all the emission stuff and all that even became a thing. You know, we were just trying to go fast, Ricky Bobby.
Right.
So
right.
we did all, that's the diesel side. And then I've always just been into racing, whether that's dirt bikes or full wheelers or just whatever I can get my hands on. I'm going to make it fast. My dad said at like 3 years old, they had a little gas four wheeler and it had a little limiter screw on the throttle. So you couldn't push it too far. He said he walked outside one day and, you know, I'm flying way faster than it's supposed to go. He looked and the screw was all the way turned in. And he said, I guess you learned how to turn the screw. I said, well, that's before my memory even remembers. So I guess we've been doing this a while.
Yeah.
So, you know, by 2009, we had actually gone really fast and involved with an HRDA, National Hot Rod Diesel Racing Association. And man, I was only 19 years old, and you know, I was trying to run a rental company. I wasn't trying to be a programmer or I never in a million years thought that this diesel that racing would have taken me where it did in business. Like that was just absolutely nuts. So by 2009, I really got in. I really was into it, and we had a couple of records by then, and I decided to go full time into it, and started that process. And then by around 2012, 2013, we had done things in the industry that no one's ever seen before with diesels, stuff that a lot of people said was impossible. So I'd say around 2013 or so, people started saying, hey, that company's different. They're doing stuff that other people haven't done yet. And for many years, couldn't do. So that really started kind of growing the business at a rate that I never expected. I sold the rental company, you know, and I'm young, you know, I'm 23 years old at that point in time. And it kept growing. I bought a building. We outgrew that building immediately. I didn't even get to move into it. And then ended up hiring a bunch of people that ended up being able to help me. And most of them are still here today. By 2015, we got contacted by the government. And by 2016, it started hitting the fan. And then kind of escalated from there. During this whole time, we were still racing and set some real big world records. You know, our diesel pro mod, we did a GM Corvette that we put a Duramax in, and you know, that was the fastest hot rod out there for a split second, and that was up in 2019. And whenever the EPA and DOJ ramped everything through the moon, I mean, it absolutely slaughtered our business, like 80% of our business. And all racing and everything else, it stopped at that point as well. So it's been just kind of a fight since I'd say 2019, 2020. And I've never, you know, I didn't know much about politics. I couldn't tell you X from Y when it comes to it. But when your back's against the wall, you got to start figuring out how to crawl out of it. And, that leads us to, after a while, diesel racing. I make new friends like you.
Right.
that are also involved in the atmosphere.
Well, that was how you and I, got introduced shortly after we got the pardon for Troy Lake and we started working with Troy on all of this. That's when all this started to come to a head. And I guess what I want to get across to people is I want to go through the entire process of how the EPA got involved. And ultimately, I want to show people what the federal government is doing to people across this country. What has actually happened. I tell everybody that the emission systems on diesel engines are like an unpaid tax that the American consumer ends up paying.
Yes.
And it's a hidden tax that nobody knows about, but we're talking about trillions and trillions of dollars into the economy every single year. And so you were saying around 2016 that you started to work with the EPA just a little bit. They had reached out and contacted you on a few things. And what year was it by the time that they criminally started investigating you?
Yeah, so 2015, we got a request for information. And then in 2016, we got a NOV, which is a notice of violation. And so we basically started trying to ask them, okay, well, how can we sell race tuning? Even if that's only 10 a year, what's a pathway that we can continue racing? Because at our core, we're a racing company. I'm a professional race car driver. Yeah. So that was most important to me. It was never about the money, never about anything like that. It was how can we race? And we continued that, and then they were coming after me for $40 million plus or some crazy amount that I wouldn't have been able to afford to settle on anyway. So this thing escalated for many years, all the way up until we were just about negotiated down on a settlement agreement in 2019. I actually thought it was pretty much all about over, and then a couple of months late, after we were pretty well on the terms of a settlement. We got a subpoena from the Department of Justice Criminal Department. So that was around August or October of 2019. And oh my God, that was something I never in a million years. It was unheard of. Yeah. I don't know if I was the first one, but I was one of the first ones to get slapped into that national compliance initiative that was introduced, that the Biden administration just absolutely ran with.
Yeah. No, and everybody, and I think we have to take a step back here and explain how all these charges are coming about. So to everybody that's listening, when it comes to the Clean Air Act, the Clean Air Act was created. It was voted on by Congress. The last time it was actually voted on by Congress was in 1990. Ever since 1990, it has not been voted on except to fund the Clean Air Act. And so any laws that were made beyond there, and I'm not even going to call them laws, I'm going to call them rules, because Congress never voted on them, so they shouldn't be laws in the first place. So everything that was voted on post 1990 had nothing to do with Congress and everything to do with the administration and the executive branch and the EPA. Well, the Clean Air Act is a very ambiguous document. It pretty much opens up anybody to anything. It has two facets to it. There's a criminal side of it, and then there's the civil side of it. Both are being used to attack the diesel industry left and right. Everybody saw Heavy D Sparks and what he was going through. Well, his was on the civil side. But what TJ Lake or Troy Lake and what Kory have been dealing with is both on civil and on the criminal side. And that's what we're trying to work through. And that's what we're trying to get people to understand. And that's really what ultimately brought us together, is working towards a solution for that. So when they came to you in the first place and they were asking you, what was going on, what did they actually tell you? What crime were you actually committing for them to come after you criminally?
Conspiracy to violate the Clean Air Act. And that's what we pled guilty to as well. At the time, Chevron deference also wasn't overturned. So if someone was wanting to challenge that, it would have been likely a poor decision, because the government would have to defer to their experts. And I mean, we've seen how well their experts worked out during COVID. So we kind of know what shape that expertise and science is going to come from. Just like in the report they did whenever we did the settlement agreement and the criminal plea came out, they made a claim that my programming and we basically could have harmed 4,500 people with respiratory disease, and that would be PM 2.5. And it's still wild to me to make that claim whenever we had just recently a Canadian wildfire in 2023 that produced more PM 2.5 than all of our automobiles combined will do in the next 1,200 years. So
Yes.
if there was a spike of, I would think that much at once, we would all have cancer right now. But I'm not a scientist, right?
But you got to trust the science, right?
Trust the science, they say.
So what they were going after was for removing emission systems or tampering with OBD2 or changing tuning on things that the government said. And I mean, again, we probably ought to step back again. Give us a rundown on emissions from 2007. I mean, tier 1 emissions hit 2007, and then they climbed from there. You want to give folks a rundown on that? Because I think this is all an important part of the backstory.
Yeah, for sure. So the manufacturers came out right around 2007.5. They started putting these after treatment systems on these diesel trucks. EGR was around for a little bit, but they started, which wasn't good. But when they started introducing the DPF systems, which is a diesel particulate filter, that is when the immediate problems started happening. It became an epidemic. I mean, these trucks flat out, they wouldn't run back then, and they still don't run today.
Don't run today.
But the biggest thing is you'd have someone that takes off with their family, or they're taking off on a business trip, and their truck breaks down and leaves them on the side of the road. Well, the first few times, we'll bring it in for warranty, we'll get that fixed, and then when it never gets fixed, people were looking for solutions. Well, they hit up the hot rod guys, just like has always happened. And for us, it wasn't like hillbillies back in the woods. Ignorance of the law doesn't mean anything, right? But at the same time, we're fixing trucks. We were fixing the problem. When we would get rid of the pipe and we'd put programming in it, which actually all we did was the programming, that would allow the vehicle to be fixed, get another 2 to 4 miles per gallon, and they could reliably take their family somewhere or put food on their table without wondering if they were going to have another climate tax situation come up from their exhaust system. It was a major problem, but those trucks used tons of EGR at the time. So then in 2011, for light duty at least, they came out with some in 2011, some were 2012, but they started doing the diesel exhaust fluid. Now, this was an absolute nightmare. In theory, the diesel exhaust fluid would have worked quite well because it would have lowered the dosing of the EGR, which is basically putting dirty air, wasting oxygen in the cylinders, and putting them more in a less efficient combustion mixture, which is bad for everything, but it lowered the NOx output. So to not use as much EGR, they relied on the DEF system. The problem is, and the problem that still exists today, well over, 15 years later or whatever, these things fail. And in cold climates especially, I mean, it's a nightmare.
Yeah, no, and that's it. So what it amounts to, folks, is they started putting filters and they started putting EGR on these trucks, which the EGR takes a certain amount of the exhaust and runs it back through the engine again. You're adding carbon back, you're adding CO2 back into the combustion chamber, which is hard on engines. I mean, it cuts engine life in half. I mean, we used to see trucks go, we used to see heavy duty trucks go 750,000 to 1 million miles. Well, now they're only rating them for about 350,000 miles. And that $60,000 overhaul they have is at half the time. They have to do twice as many of those on these trucks now. And you want to know why your transportation costs are so high? You want to know why your grocery bill's so high? You want to know why it costs so much to get something shipped? Well, here's the beginning of the culprit. And as we dive into some of these numbers, you'll see that this is the hidden tax that I'm telling everybody about, and it's all brought upon by the federal government. And so then the filters became a problem. And companies right now are figuring, big trucking companies, excavation companies, and even people across the board with light duty stuff they're contributing 80% of breakdowns in diesel engines to the after treatment systems. They are extremely unreliable. They are extremely finicky. They have all sorts of issues with them, and they just are not good. They're working in an extremely hot environment with extremely caustic chemicals, and it's just not good for the vehicle itself. And the efficiencies, I want everybody to remember back, everybody that drives a diesel pickup right around 2006, when common rail first came out and high pressure injection systems were first coming online, you started to see your pickups get pretty good mileage. You were seeing a light duty pickup get 19, 20, 21, 22 miles to the gallon. Well, immediately on the release of the 07.5, when they hit them with tier 1 emissions and the DPF filters, you watch that drop clear back down to 14. And even today, we're still talking about a 25% reduction in fuel economy. And when you times that by 30 million diesel engines across the United States, what a number that becomes.
Right. What's the fuel? And the thing is I think there's a major issue with the way that it's measured. So currently, the way they measure these systems is 150,000 miles is the useful life of the emission system, or 10 years. They say whichever one comes first. And one thing I learned about DC is that no one I was speaking to at EPA or DOJ over the past 10 years had any knowledge of this, at least on the levels that we're dealing with. The fuel penalty by itself is a major concern. And then just likewise, the cardboard boxes and the plastics that all the DEF comes in, if we're only measuring the vehicle's emissions from 0 to 150,000 miles, we're not factoring in the fuel penalty. And when we have a fuel penalty, how far does that go? If I'm getting 3 to 4 less miles per gallon every time I have to go, and it brings me to the pump faster, then there's a big rig that has the same problem that's also delivering all the fuel there. And then there's a big rig that's going to be delivering all the DEF in plastic jugs wrapped in cardboard containers that you see on the side of the road filling up gas stations.
Saving the world one plastic jug and cardboard box at a time.
One jug at a time. And then the systems they break, right? Sure. What they'll say is you can clean them at 150 or 200,000 miles and they'll keep going. That is not real world statistics. You're lucky if you get to 150,000 miles for the most part. In our company now, we do all emissions present tuning because I can't, as one of the top racing companies in America for diesels, I can't legally go racing because in 2020, the Biden administration had put firm language in that had stated once a motor vehicle, always a vehicle. Once it's certified, it can never be decertified. So there's not even a legal pathway right now for someone to race a vehicle. So everyone you see online that's racing these new Corvettes, diesel trucks, everything, they're all at risk because the language says that you can't do that. So you're just waiting for, this administration's been great, right?
Sure. We've been working with them extensively, but there's a lot of people still at risk because of language that's still on the books. And at the end of the day, what we're getting at in all this and what so many mechanics and shops across the country, I mean, we're not just talking about you, we're talking about the lakes and we're talking about countless other shops who are raided by the EPA, FBI with automatic weapons. There are videos floating around of people being pulled out of their homes, mechanics being pulled out of their homes with a gun in their face for basically what amounts to removing a catalytic converter off your car. It's like if somebody went to Home Depot and you bought a new shower head. When you take that shower head home, the first thing you do is pull the water restrictor out of the back of it, right? Because it doesn't let enough water. Well, that's about exactly what was happening with these trucks. And people were put in prison for it. They're fined. You guys were fined millions upon millions of dollars for fixing a problem that exists. And the one thing that really got me crossways with the Lake case is that they were doing it to fire trucks and to ambulances and to school buses that wouldn't run otherwise. Fire trucks were missing calls. Fire trucks were actually starting brush fires while in regen because these systems are flawed and they are causing problems for emergency service, for transportation, for agriculture, all across the board. And it's a massive problem that we have. And yet y'all were coming up with the solutions for it. And it's not about making the environment dirty, and it's about finding that net cause effect benefit. Because as you said, all they've ever focused on when it comes to the EPA is tailpipe emissions. And this is something I think we really need to dive into is
What?
tailpipe emissions. That's all they ever figured on. They weren't figuring the fact that it costs 25% more fuel. They're not figuring in that you have to replace that engine at half life. They're not figuring any of these other external factors, the DEF, the effects that DEF is having on pollinators in the country. They are not figuring any of these external effects into it. So why do you think that they keep going after people who are doing this? And why do you think they came? I know this is a rhetorical question, but why do you think they came down so hard in the first place?
Well, it was kind of funny because Clay Higgins and I were actually having a conversation about this before my oversight that we did back in September on the similar topic. And I mean, this is a theory. I'm gonna just throw a pie in the sky, but
Sure.
they were that administration was so aggressive to go to net zero, which isn't even realistic.
Yeah,
But to go to
not
net
realistic.
zero, no combustion, just a pipe stream. They
Sure.
were absolutely obsessed with the perception of doing good while ignoring what the reality of doing good would be. So whenever they started coming in with this, I think a big thing was how are they supposed to uphold their argument that this is great for the environment when there's people like us that make it get 2 to 4 more miles per gallon? We talk about the systems failing. And then above all, it can have more horsepower. The truck can listen. NASCAR exists for a reason. How well has Formula E done compared to
Right.
F1, right? You can see
Sure.
Max Verstappen talking about it right now. There are hot rod people in America that want to hear their vehicles.
Sure.
You can't hear anything with these exhaust systems on. And so the hot rod side of the world, which is a lot of America, they wanted to also hear their trucks. So whenever you tell someone, hold on, it's not going to break down for all these reasons anymore, so it's going to be more reliable. I can get better fuel economy. It actually sounds like a diesel, if you decided to have it like that. Like there's so many reasons as to why people did it. And those reasons are all good reasons. So
Sure.
if that supports that combustion engines could actually be awesome, then it harms the argument of all the perception of good that you're doing over here. And I
Right.
believe Congressman said that during the hearing as well. Something very similar to that is it's not very convenient to have
Yeah.
people like us doing what we were doing while they're trying to spread this other argument. It's very similar to trying to make Joe Rogan's face yellow on TV because ivermectin was not
Right.
good. You know what I mean? They'll do whatever. It was just cancel culture.
Right. No, and that's what it amounts to, and that's really what I saw is they wanted to make an example out of a few select people because it's never the end user that they're going after. It's never your
Yeah.
clients or anything like that. It was always the person in the middle. The mechanics were the ones bearing the brunt of it, and in a huge way. I mean, at some point we're going to start releasing all of these videos with all of it. It's all going to come out at some point. But
Yeah.
again, this is not about making the environment dirty. This is not about making
No.
pickups blow black smoke. This is not about any of that because all of us that have gotten together in our group here and what you and I, we want to see a cleaner environment. But the
Yes.
technology is there. We had the conversation with Dave Bell not too long ago and new technology that's out. If you let the OEM and the professionals in this industry make the decision, because for too long what's happened is the government has said this is the problem and this is how you have to fix it. This is
Right.
mandated 100%. This is the only way to do it. It's the only way you get to do it. This is it. Turn the manufacturers loose, turn the professionals in this industry loose, let them come up with a solution to this that finds the common balance between the two of them, because I guarantee you can do it. And from all the data that we have and everything that we've looked at and the technology that exists today, I believe, and I believe you feel the same way, that we can still meet the same emission standards with what we have today without all the extra garbage.
Yeah, and I think that brings us into the conversation of what actually should the emission standard be, right?
Yeah,
Because right now the way we're calculating it is just simply wrong. Useful life argument is just trash, right? If a
sure.
vehicle goes 500,000 miles, which all these engines are supposed to go 500,000 miles, but we quit measuring
Should.
at 150,000, then we've got a pipe dream that what we're doing good. The
Yeah,
reality is most people end up deleting those trucks, or the emission systems so deteriorated that it's worse than the deleted truck because of all the back pressure and issues it has. Or three, what most commonly happen is someone has a 400,000 mile truck, they sell it at auction, something because it hardly runs. The next guy gets it because that can afford it, that's in that
yeah,
price bracket of what they can afford, and they say, "Oh no, this thing doesn't run. It's in D-rate." And
yeah,
well, I want to be legal. I'm running DOT. I'm starting a business. I'm gonna do it legal. So they'll spend $6,000 to $12,000 replacing the emission system.
yep,
They fire the truck up, and you still have the same problem. It's like, how do I still have a PM or a NOx problem in the exhaust? This is all brand new. Well, they're considering that the emissions are tired by 150,000 miles while not considering anything about the engine degradation. So
yeah.
if the engine, you've got turbo seals that get loose. There's a little bit like they say, well, just why don't you just maintenance the whole entire vehicle? Come on.
Come on.
How many
That's
people do
more
you
than the
know that are taking?
vehicle's worth.
Yeah, how many people do you know are taking intercoolers off and cleaning them so that way their exhaust pipe doesn't throw a code? That's the
Oh yeah.
realities, and it's
No, prime
harming people.
example. Prime example was working with the Lakes the other day, and they got a call from somebody out east. 2016 Peterbilt. I think it had 350, 400,000 miles on it at this point. They had a system code for the exhaust system come up. They had taken it into another shop and asked them, what can we do to repair this? What does repair costs look like? To replace the after treatment system on that truck was $41,000. This is a semi truck that should go between 750 to a million miles.
And
At
what's that truck
400,
worth? Like 40,
40,000.
50 grand?
Yeah, about
So the
40,000.
emission system costs 1,000 more.
Bingo. The emission
Oh
system
my
costs
god!
exactly what the truck is worth. So guess what they're going to do with that truck? They're going to park it. Whereas if we lived in a world where things were done right, they could take and remove the emission systems off of it. They can overhaul that engine, and that truck should be good for another 750,000 miles.
That's it.
But yet we're scrapping them, and they're ending up in scrap yards, and we're having to replace and rebuild all these things. What toll is that taking on our manufacturing sector? What
Oh
toll
my
is that
god!
taking on parts? What toll is that taking on the mining sector? What could we be doing with all the rare earth minerals? So people don't understand how many rare earth minerals are actually in the DPF systems. I mean, that thing is full of palladium and platinum, and it has all. I think if you recycle them, they're worth. Don't go doing it, but I think they're worth about $1,200
Oh
for a
man,
big rig one.
yeah,
And
they bring money.
because of all the precious metals, well, what is the arms race in the world about right now? Well, it's about precious metals. Well, how many are we wasting putting in these filters when we could be doing something completely different? And
That's it.
and that's the point that I keep coming back to with folks is these guys that are making these rules, they read a book once, but we're
Yes.
not listening to the industry experts and the engineers who actually understand and know what's happening on the ground. And that's to me the problem, because what
Yeah.
made our country great in the first place was releasing American ingenuity, was handing the reins and handing that freedom to somebody who knew what they were doing, and to somebody that had stake in the game, and somebody that could make it go. That's what made our country great to start with. That's what drove us to become what a powerhouse we are in 250 years. Well, we're walking backwards from that now. We're taking the ability from these people to make these decisions, to make these great things, and to do what's right. We're taking it away from them.
Right. And we must ask the question, for what do we have a return on investment on this? And does this make sense? And whenever you look at something like the example I used earlier, that the Canadian wildfire in 2023, which by the way, I was racing a UTV through the mountains and everything, and the smoke was well blown over into America. We all remember that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
If that released enough PM 2.5 that it's going to take 1,200 years for our auto emissions to make up for, man, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Yep.
Why we need to be so stringent. But another elephant in the room is, the manufacturers, the current standards that they're required to meet are just simply unbelievable. And
Yes.
that's why there's so many problems. And it's not like there isn't a standard out there that doesn't exist, right? These Fords that we have, these Dodges that we have, the majority of these vehicles, we ship them to other countries without after treatment. So
Yep.
the standard already exists. And that makes me nervous because, especially with, all the conflict and everything we got going on now, which the
Sure.
administration absolutely kicking butt with. But what happened? Who's to tell me that I don't have an emergency with my vehicle and I'm going to be stuck in D-rate because of some back-ordered pipe, or heaven forbid, we can't even get the exhaust system back over here? We can ship these to other countries and they can have that type of freedom. But yet here in America, you'll go to prison and have your whole entire life turned upside down and your privacy invaded and your family come after and debank because I modified the exhaust on my truck. Like, that's something that needs to change. And that's why I'm advocating so hard. This has to change.
Well, that comes to the national security risk of all these things. A lot of these parts, a lot of these tunes, a lot of the DPF parts themselves and the after treatment parts are coming from China. We're getting a ton of these parts for these vehicles are coming from China. I mean, look at during COVID, you had the giant parking lots full of pickup trucks because they couldn't get parts because they all came from China. And we have outsourced the making of all these things. Whereas if we roll back on these things and stop putting such a huge emphasis on the after treatment, which is sucking up 80% of the parts manufacturing, and got back to manufacturing the parts that are actually necessary, man, how many trucks could we get back on the road? How much could we cut?
Would they be? How much money will people save? How much money will people save just by being able to get good miles per gallon?
Sure.
I mean, that would be, and above all things, reliability. I'm scared. I'm normally scared to take my truck. And I got a 2024 new truck. Every once in a while, it'll give me a little DEF message saying there's a problem, and then it magically goes away. And it's like, okay, I don't trust to drive this truck across the country. And it's a $100,000 truck.
Yep.
That's
it.
What? That's crazy.
And again, the costs of adding these to new pickups. I mean, they're estimating between $15,000 and $20,000 of the cost of a new pickup is coming from the after treatment systems on these things. And when you see them and how complex they are, and all of that, it's all of that, and it adds to the cost of new pickups. It adds to the cost of maintenance. You and I discussed it. What did we come up with? About $30,000 over the life of that truck that will cost you extra on top of owning that truck just for what the DPF system does to it.
And Carson, this is public. Speaking of that truck, so we're talking about a 2007 LBZ Duramax, what it's called, versus 2007.5 LMM Duramax. That is pretty much exactly the same truck.
Yeah.
The difference is the LMM, the 2007.5, has after treatment. I made a post on Facebook, and I've got a good bit of followers, millions of views a month, so people see it. I posted, I said, I'm looking for a stock LBZ and I'm looking for a stock LMM. And my intentions were to bring it back to my facility, put it in the lab, and I'll run a full emission cycle on both of them and let's see what's actually healthy. Of course, I couldn't find an LMM. I had LBZs all over the place. Man, you could have this, you could have that. There are no LMMs in the comments section because they're either A, broken, or B, they're deleted.
Yep.
Which I
other than that, they won't be alive.
That's
I mean,
so
other than that, they won't be alive.
Yeah.
No, and that's what it's all coming back to is there is a huge problem. And this doesn't just exist in the light duty world. Again, we ran some numbers and we've been working with the Small Business Administration and with the EPA on these things and with congressional officials. And our estimates right now that are if they took it simply alone, if they took them off of tractors and over the road semi trucks, it would save every family in the United States $2,000 a month on their food, $2,000 a year, on their food costs alone. $2,000 back in every American's pocket, not to mention what that means to the farmers, not to mention what that means to the truckers. If you figure in a semi truck 20% more fuel economy, you're talking about between $50,000 and $60,000 a year in fuel savings alone per vehicle on the road, which is about 4 million over the road trucks in the United States. The cost savings become astronomical. And the overall thought on all this is about $2 trillion in savings back into the economy every year if we simply removed these after treatment systems off of all diesel engines in the United States. And the net figure is showing us that we would actually be less pollutant than we are now because of all of the other figures going into it.
Absolutely. And we got to look at the global effect of this thing, right? Which this should be measured cradle to the grave. But if we look at the global effect of this, it ties back into what we said earlier. If people really, really, really hate the fossil fuel industry, the ones that hate it the most are doing the best job at making sure more oil gets pulled out the ground and put in these trucks, because you're looking at 2 to 4 mile per gallon penalty. So not only does it make the vehicle more, the endangerment finding, EPA come back and said this could save $2,400 on a vehicle. Could you imagine this?
Right.
It's real numbers. But likewise,
because all they were focused on was the start-stop button.
Yeah, right. So it's like, no. And everybody and their brother thought that was actually the fix to after treatment. And the internet went wild. I posted a video of Trump saying, these junk DEF systems and this junk don't work and my tractors don't run. When I posted that, I made it explicitly letting people know this does not make it legal. It's not legal.
Right.
But people just skim over it and ran with it. That video's over 4 million views and the comment section's in the thousands. So it's like, oh, people want this. The American people want this so bad.
It's not legal yet, everyone. We're working on it. It's not legal yet. But help is on the way. But that's another good thing to touch on is the endangerment finding. I mean, they rolled that back 3 weeks ago now. I mean, that's huge. People don't between the overturn of Chevron doctrine, which let everybody defer to the EPA and everybody else to answer all the questions, when the Supreme Court overthrew that one, and now the EPA has come out and said that the endangerment finding was wrong. And the reason why Zeldin gave that this was happening is because the numbers were wrong. And everybody needs to understand, like, everybody must understand the endangerment finding. You got to trust the science. The endangerment finding was the Steele dossier of the environmental world. They have to understand that it is a made up number that they use to cram down their Green New Deal garbage onto everyone for all these years. It was instituted in 2009 under Obama. Again, thank you to the EPA for rolling that back, and kudos to it, because their words were, the numbers are wrong. And we've been deferring to these climate groups and these activist groups and the IPCC and all of these things, these giant global groups, to tell us what to do here in America. Well, I think those days are over.
Right. And the administration signaled that a lot of people aren't looking at the root causes. They're just looking at high level stuff. So they're like, nothing's getting done, but they don't understand. The Trump came out and defunded so many moving parts, and the Trump administration came out and removed 66 organizations, and the IPCC was one of those. That was a group that became very weaponized towards the benefit of what this new communist style revolution that they had going on was doing, and their numbers would support a lot of that. But whenever we want to run real numbers, which isn't even that difficult to do, right? A lot of common sense. It's like, hey, I don't think we're getting a return. And when they looked at that for the endangerment finding, it come out to be true. And what we're speaking about now, it will come out to be true on the criteria of pollutants as well.
100%. I have no doubt that that's the case. And the one thing, and the point that I've made to a lot of folks about, the endangerment finding and the IPCC's regulations and all of these things was, what happens was, look at solar panels, look at windmills, all those things were in the Green New Scam, all of those big things. They jump head first into everything. These climate environmentalist, communist types, they jump head first into all of it, and they go all in, and they chuck a ton of government money in it, and they make it at such a huge scale that it actually does have an impact on the environment. I mean, what are we going to do with all these solar panels when it's time to be done with them and retire them? Well, look at what they're doing with the windmills. They're just standing them up in landfills and piling them suckers up because their useful life is over, and they're extremely hard to remove. Well, they're doing the same thing with diesel engines. We're finding out now that burning DEF at high temperatures creates an acid that is actually toxic to pollinators, bees, butterflies, all of them. It's making them so they can't find flowers to actually pollinate. It's actually killing a bunch of bees in transport for the honeybee sector in agriculture. It is a huge problem, and they've done it at such a scale now that it actually is having environmental impact. And that is an important thing to note, that they are doing it on such a broad scale that it is ruining the environment.
That's it. And I mean, it's still mind boggling to me that they were able to put this $1 billion problem just in 1 year, tossed it out there,
Yeah.
see all the issues, and there never be any type of environmental impact of what was happening, replacing these pipes over and over and over, the manufacturing cost to do it. So,
Sure.
we spend just annually in fuel penalties during regen. So what regen is that's basically the exhaust. It accumulates the soot, the ash, and then it'll get really, really hot to between 1,450 degrees, and it will burn off all the ash inside of the pipe. During that time, not the overall economy, just during the time of its emission cycle while you're driving, that's costing America allegedly close to $1,600 billion annually. So if
That's
you really
unreal.
hate fossil fuel companies, they're not complaining about that mandate. I promise you, they're pulling more out the ground.
I'm telling you, but we still could be. That's a point I want to make with the geopolitical events in Iran and Venezuela and everything else that's going on. What could 25% more oil in the system do for our strategic reserves? What could
Oh
it do
my
for our
God, yeah.
export markets? It's not like we're slowing down. It's like we're supercharging the economy because we're making what we have go a lot farther. But now
That's
that
it.
we've kind of gone through the entire regulatory cycle and people now know what DEF is and what these after treatment systems and what the numbers are, and now I want to dive into what they actually did to you, what they did to you and your family, and what they put you guys through, and what that process looked like. I mean, start at the beginning.
Yeah. So, in 15, we got the NOV, and then we were trying to figure out what that was, what to do with it. And in 2016, we were hitting it, had a ton of demands and all kinds of stuff. We didn't actually get that negotiated down until close to 2019, which it had to be negotiated down to a realistic amount. It was just,
Sure.
it was it was undoable. Their demands were just insane. So we get that done, and then the criminal side happened, and I had a lot of personal stuff going on in my life at the same time, so it was a very difficult time for me. But I had gone to, I believe I went and met my attorneys out in Salt Lake, and I was told I was going to be hit with a bunch of counts on the criminal side of things, and I wasn't ready for that. I totally didn't expect that. It scared the heck out of me. I went
And
back
this
to
is
my
all for
hotel.
removing these systems or changing tuning. That is all.
Yeah, it's modifying a diesel exhaust.
Yep.
And I went back to my hotel room and I sat down for about 2 hours, just processed it, and then turned on the TV and watched a hurricane destroy everything I owned. So it was a really, really bad day. The next couple of years were kind of a blur, just trying to, to cope in the life, for example. But
yeah,
we were dealing with I've spent over $7 million in attorney fees. The fine amount was 3.1. So a lot of people say, oh my God, the fine amount would have crushed me. It's like, no. The process would have crushed you.
The process is the punishment.
It was unbelievable. I mean, I've never felt like such a dirty, nasty, unworthy person treated in such a way that it's like you're a killer. You know what I mean?
Right.
Your stuff kills people. You're killing people. And when people passionately believe that because they're simply uneducated on how this all works, and they're doing the right moral duty in their heads. And so they're going to pursue that with passion.
And they do.
And they do. And it was extremely difficult. Our banking sector got really, really, really messed up. I had my Facebook and Meta's, like my social media accounts were taken. We had to supply tens of thousands.
By the FBI, correct?
Yeah, tens of thousands of pages. I went through I don't even know how many depositions, or they may have been interrogations. It feels like the same thing, but we went through that through the civil side first, thought it was all done, and then it got repeated again for the criminal side. So it was like a double dose of the same thing over and over, except the second time you might be facing, 5+ years in prison.
Yeah.
So, we dealt with that. And then in roughly 20, lots of, and COVID was going on at the same time. So I would have to go get that like $270, stick that thing halfway into your
Up your
brain.
nose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So and then, during COVID, there was a lot of spots that weren't open. So I'd go to DC and have to go eat in a gas station because I didn't have a Vax card. It was a nightmare.
Wow.
And then 2024, I went and I pled guilty to the Clean Air Act violations, and then I was set up for a 10-month home confinement, and so we did that as well. And the one big deal is I was really fighting since 2015, and it's honestly still a fight today. It's still unresolved. My consent decree, they were requiring me to go. This was a big holdup as well between 2016 and 2019. Was the consent decree. They were requiring my company to go through the California Air Resource Board for emissions, and we told them hey, that never works out well. Can we use a third party? Can we use a SEMA lab? And at the time, the people in the civil spot, who has been the most difficult on the consent decree, hands down by far, civil side.
For sure.
They've been very difficult. But they were saying, no, you have to go there. We said, well, what about SEMA? They're a certified garage. And they had come back and said, SEMA does mostly pretty vehicles and advocates for the industry. We're not allowing that. You're going to go through CARB. So we spent, $100,000 or whatever dollars trying to get CARB certifications. And still to date, we don't have those CARB certs. So they tried to shut us down sometime around April. Basically said this is going to be a hardship and burdensome for you, but our position is not changing. And that was the DOJ. And so we had no choice, and we went ahead and sued against the consent decree, and that was in April of 25, and that is still unresolved right now. But thankfully, the judge seen that we shouldn't be shut down, so we've got that protection, thank God.
Yeah, and so at the end of the day, they threaten your family, they put you on house arrest, they fine you millions upon millions of dollars. It costs to defend yourself is millions and millions of dollars, all for modifying diesel exhaust systems. And I want to make a point here. And when you look at all of these charges, and this brings us back to where we started, when you look at all of the charges, you'll notice I have yet to see anybody actually been prosecuted for violating the Clean Air Act. It is always conspiracy to violate the Clean Air Act. And why? Because the Clean Air Act is not a law. The Clean Air Act was never voted on by lawmakers. It's a rule made up by nameless, faceless bureaucrats that have zero accountability anywhere, and they're ruining people's lives in the name of the Clean Air Act.
Yeah, it's I hate to say it this way, but it's like a climate cult. Whenever when we would deal with it, they didn't want to hear us out. They were demeaning to us, and we were lesser than. People like us, we're lesser than. So it was unbelievable. I wouldn't wish any of it on my worst enemy, but I mean, it changed my life. I thought I was tough and I was a good business owner, but it brought me very, very close to Jesus. I was on my knees and everything felt gone. And man, I remember everything was dark. August 23. I told God, if you just help me with this, help me get through this, just sell me as a vessel and I'll get through it. I changed my diet that day. I ate just meat, eggs, and butter. I've ran thousands of miles or whatever since then. I got in really good shape. So it forced me to absolutely level up as a man. But man, I felt and seen a darkness that some of my friends that have dealt with this, whom have taken their own lives over this, they were the EPA and DOJ came after them, and they felt it was so bad. They felt like it was a better decision to end their lives so their family, has a chance through insurance or whatever, because the government's about to ruin their whole entire life. And I wasn't.
Sick.
I leveled up. It's sick, man. What they've done, what I'm describing here, is still nothing.
Yeah. No, and like you say, Jesus at the end of the day is the answer, and he can help you get through just about. He
He's
can help you
carried us
through
through, man.
everything,
He's
and
carried
he
us through, and
has.
he's gonna fix this situation. He's gonna help us fix this
He's going to
situation. I
help us
believe it.
right the
I
wrongs that
believe
were
it.
done,
Yes.
and that's it. And so that brings me to another point is what are the solutions? And you and I have talked about this extensively. We have Senator Lummis's bill, the
Yeah.
Diesel Liberation Act. We have Mike Lee's Rains Act. We have the EPA overturning the endangerment finding. We have Chevron has been overturned by the Supreme Court. We have everything in our favor. The administration is moving. Tell them about what our plan is next.
So I think I wouldn't claim to be the top dog of of all the solutions, but I think number one is, what is the realistic output that's happening right now whenever we consider our emissions output from cradle to the grave? Because what we're trying to achieve right now is not being achieved. It just looks like it because the measurement system's from 0 to 150,000.
Sure.
So just like PM 2.5, I'm in the same aspect of, well, I don't want to see smoke. I do not want to see trucks going down the road blowing smoke, regardless of what people would think of me. Like, that's not our goal. My race car didn't smoke, and it ran 424 to 170 mile an hour. So
right.
Smoke's not necessary. And I think if you see if a truck's smoking, then let the local enforcement write this guy a ticket. You know what I mean? Or do whatever, give them a fix-it ticket, treat it like that. As far as, I think a realistic standpoint would be to go to what we're shipping to other countries right now. I think we should be the most favored country.
Absolutely.
So if we're shipping, however,
most favored nation status when it comes to these kind of things.
Right? Because we're definitely not the most favored nation when it comes to this, because we're shipping we ship vehicles out with no after treatment. So I'd say the OEMs already have a good standard to go to. We could start there, considering that this is realistically an emergency. If something really bad happened in America and a lot of people can't drive because their stupid trucks are shutting down or they're plugged up,
well, they can't ship anything. You can't get food. You can't farm. I mean, it's a bad deal, and it's a national security crisis.
It is. And the thing is I think it's super important to put this in. So the Biden administration went the hardest in history after mobile sources, right? That's not debated. They came in at full force to the point of putting people in prison, and the results of their national compliance initiative ended up being that exports markets, like you were saying earlier, China. It's China and Russia, and it goes into Canada, and it sells a lot through Canada right back to the United States. Although they penalized people at the maximum degree, they made the market 3 times bigger for what they were trying to get rid of. So the government intervention killed roughly 60% of the diesel performance companies, while at the same time enriching foreign countries by 3x of what the original problem was here. And people will say, well, how did the problem get bigger? Well, it got cheaper. It got totally unregulated, right? Because people like us, rather we should or shouldn't have been doing it regardless. At least there was some type of regulation. This is the price. This is where it's going to be. And then the rest of the market followed. Whenever these other countries seen that there's a problem in America that people are going to fix, regardless of your enforcement, they came in and they did it. And now these companies are all high five Canada. You're smoking us right now. Good job. I don't blame you for it, but it didn't resolve the problem. So if maximum enforcement made the problem worse, I think we just need to revisit some common sense solutions, because in trying to put 60% of the market in prison didn't fix the problem and literally made it worse. And the programming that's coming into America, most of it was originally stolen from America, but the stuff that's not, dude, it's trash. I don't like the idea of foreign softwares being installed in American vehicles. And it's such a bad problem with my company that does emissions present. We started a diagnostic service to try to help people diagnose their problems, because they're getting tunes from all over the country. And the tuners either don't talk back to them, or they'll just say, oh, that's just how it is. So we'll look at it and I'll be like, yeah, your truck's broken. It's got a programming problem. We can't help them. I can't provide any solutions or anything like that. But they're so desperate that they're buying from out of the country so their trucks run. And then when it runs worse, because it's hacked junk programming, they're looking for anybody to just try to help them. It's an epidemic, and it's known. It's
Oh,
not a secret. It is very known all through the performance land.
no, and that's
We're getting
exactly.
crushed,
We're getting killed, and so
killed.
I think Congress has to start taking it. We've been in conversations with them, with EPA, SBA, all of the above, and I think they've got to start taking it seriously. And
I
what
agree.
people can do to people are like, what can we do to help? What can we do to do this? Go support the EPA when they do something. When they do
That's
something right,
it.
like roll back the endangerment finding, go
Yeah,
comment on it. Send them an email, do all those things, because when they feel people are kind of pushing them to do the right thing, it is the right thing. And then you got things like Senator Lummis's Diesel Liberation Act. Yeah, give
yeah,
her your support for that. And then even further than that, you've got Mike Lee's REINS Act. And to me, that is one of the second most important piece of legislation that's on the docket right now behind the Save America Act.
I
They just
agree.
need to get that one done and out of the way. But what the REINS Act does is if it has an economic impact more than $100 million, Congress has to vote on it. It's no more three-letter agencies making up rules. It's no more nameless, faceless bureaucrats making laws and imposing these hidden taxes on American citizens and sending people to prison for things that were never voted on by our elected officials. That needs to happen. And it's not just in the diesel space, this is in every space.
Bless.
It should be our lawmakers that we can hold accountable.
I agree, and that's the deal. Is we can the way this system's supposed to work is I know my local lawmakers. They're great people, and I can sit with them, describe the issue. They can even come in and I show them how things work or reports,
Right.
and they get it. But the whenever I go to EPA and I've dealt with this historically in the past 10 years, they don't know anything really besides the fact of we don't like what you're doing and you're a bad
Right.
guy. And
Right.
that sucks. Like that's the people that don't understand what they're doing or don't even understand the cases they're working on have no business in the rulemaking process. And
Right.
if we would have had the REINS Act in and we factored all these economic costs in prior to them just pushing these after treatment systems in, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now because it would show it didn't make sense and we don't get a return on investment as the taxpayer. And it actually costs way more.
Right. And it
It's a
goes
negative.
back to what I said earlier. The people making these rules read a book once. Most of them have no real world experience. And that's not just in EPA. That's not just, I mean, that is across the board in Washington, D.C., that you have a lot of people who don't actually know what's going on making laws. And we should at least have somebody to hold accountable for something they do instead of somebody who you're never going to see and you have no avenue to hold them accountable for it, for imposing these things on your life. And so at the end of all that, you've been through it all. You've seen both sides of the system. And I don't think people understand how vulnerable they are just as an American citizen. I mean, the Clean Air Act, I mean, ask Heavy D. Sparks. The Clean Air Act opens you up to civil enforcement. If somebody sees you out on the freeway, they can actually and think that you're polluting too much. There's no burden of proof. They have to prove nothing. They can sue you civilly in the name of the Clean Air Act and say your vehicle was polluting too much, and they can sue you for just about whatever they want. And this is happening left and right, and we have to close that loophole. And I think the REINS Act is the right message to be able to do that.
Yeah, I totally agree. The criminal enforcements were totally insane. But a lot of folks like, oh, criminal enforcement's gone, so now it's just civil. Don't sit on that.
Don't.
That civil enforcement was an absolute life changing nightmare.
Yep.
It's no joke. Like when they come, the way that the I'm sure there's some amazing people there. I've got to give credit. I've dealt with some amazing people at DOJ. I've dealt with amazing people at EPA. Not everybody in government's bad by any means.
Yeah.
There's some people there that really helped me. So I don't want to discredit and say they're all terrible people. But one thing for sure, they have absolutely no business in this rulemaking process at
Yep.
all.
There it is.
So it needs to, we need to get this back down to where if someone's going to force us to spend more money on something, then we should be able to have some representation through our representatives for that. And that's what the REINS Act would tie in. I'm all for it.
Absolutely. Absolutely, man. Well, at the end of the day, We know what the problem is. We know what the solutions are, and we're our group is working towards them. And we've got a big bunch of big things coming. Nothing that we can really put out there yet. We're putting
Yeah.
together a coalition, the Diesel Freedom Coalition. We'll have a lot on that hopefully here soon to help everybody and to help reverse these things and to do it. But buddy, thanks for joining me today. I know you're off to Georgia to speak at an event, but thanks for coming on, and I'm sure we'll talk to you again here shortly.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Carson. I enjoyed it.
Yep, take her easy, bud.
Thanks for joining us today. If you enjoyed this episode, hit that like button, subscribe to the podcast, and make sure you turn on your notifications so you know when we release a new episode. Thanks again, and we'll see y'all soon.